E. E. Cummings was born on October 14, 1884, in Cambridge, Massachusetts. He was born the eldest child of Edward Cummings and Rebecca Haswell Clark. His family is very well educated. His father was a Unitarian minister, and before that, he was a professor at Harvard. He looked up to his father and had a very good relationship with him.
I think the reason he was so well educated was because he looked up to his father so much. His father was a very big inspiration to him.
It was really both of his parents who influenced him to become a poet and recognized his genius. For example, his mother read him poetry daily. She also encouraged him to start writing poetry as early as 10 years old.
Cummings was still a child when he decided that he wanted to become a poet. Throughout his childhood, he wrote poems daily and was able to explore many different types of poetry. By the time he was at Harvard, modern poetry had caught his interest.
He began to write avant-garde poems in which conventional punctuation and syntax were ignored.
World War I began, and Cummings was drawn to the action. He became an ambulance driver because he considered himself a pacifist. He used his writing skills to outwit the censors and send back letters home. Because he identified himself as a pacifist, he easily befriended soldiers of all nationalities. This led him to imprisonment under suspicion of treason. His imprisonment was in a large room and was held with other suspicious foreigners for a year. When it came to his love life, Cummings was an interesting man.
Cummings wasn't really a follower of the bro code. Anyways, when he returned from war, he immediately continued having an affair with his best friend's wife. What a sly dog.
The friend's wife was Elaine Thayer, and the friend, Schofield Thayer, surprisingly didn't mind the affair. Elaine Thayer gave birth to Cummings' child, Nancy, and after that, Elaine and Schofield divorced, allowing Elaine to remarry with Cummings. Like they say, opposites attract, which could be why Elaine and Cummings' relationship was not the one that lasted. It was not long until Elaine cheated on Cummings with a man she met during her trip in Europe, whom she left Cummings for. However, this was not the end of Cummings' love life.
Cummings was a rather attractive man. And due to that, he was a catch for most women. After he and Elaine were divorced, he remarried to Anne Barton. But that was another relationship that would not last.
After settling back in after the war, Cummings had his first book published in 1922. The name of the book was The Enormous Room.
The Enormous Room was a work that received positive feedback, which was surprising, considering the topic of the book was Cummings' time in prison. However, Cummings found a way to make this experience somewhat positive, which is a unique aspect of his.
The Enormous Room was just the start of Cummings' career as a writer. A year later, he finally came out with his first collection of poems, Tulips and Chimneys.
When it came to poetry, Cummings was one who played by his own rules, if you know what I mean. His punctuation and grammar did not follow the basic standards, and when he first sent his works to be published, some of them were taken out by the publisher, along with the original title of the book. But Cummings, wow, what a persistent man. That did not stop him at all. No siree.
In 1925, Cummings published his second book, called 41 Poems, and by now, Cummings' fame was growing so much that by the end of this year, the Dial magazine awarded him with their annual award of $2,000.
Go. Through all his work, what really struck the public most about E. E. Cummings was the way he wrote what he did. He used words that were uncommon during that time period. And it wasn't just his word choice, if you know what I mean, but the way he arranged the words in the poetry. His spacing was irregular and his capitalization was the way he wanted it to be.
In his poetry, Cummings addressed many themes that stood out to the public, such as childhood and flowers, but the theme that he is most well known for was love. It has been said that the inspiration for his early love poems was his first wife, Elaine. Cummings also had a taste in theatrical performances and wrote his own play, Him.
Once again, Cummings created something out of the ordinary with his play named Him. This play was unlike any other play, and it dealt with love story. It was told in a series of short vignettes about love between him, the man in the story, and me, the woman in the story.
On January 1st, 1932, Cummings was married to his third wife, Miriam Morehouse. Their marriage lasted until his death in 1962.
Cummings and his second wife were separated for 2 years before they were actually divorced. But he and Marianne Morehouse had already been married a year before he and his second wife were already divorced.
He was one of the most individual poets who ever lived. And though it sometimes seems so, it is not just his vices and aggravations, the defects of his quality, that make a writer popular, but primarily Mr. Cummings' poems are loved because they are full of sentimentality, of sex, of more or less improper jokes, and of elementary lyric insistence.
Between the 1920s and 50s, there was not much change in Cummings' work. This made some people regard his work as inferior. I disagree. No.
After suffering from cerebral hemorrhaging, E. E. Cummings passed away on September 3rd, 1962, in New Hampshire. He was buried in Forest Hill Cemetery and Crematorium in Boston. E. E. Cummings made a huge impact on how our future poets saw and wrote their poetry. He challenged how people normally read poetry with his unconventional use of capitalization and punctuations, which were placed throughout his poems. Due to this inspiration from transcendentalism, satire, and love, he resonated with his readers and inspired many people to challenge the conventional ideas and ways of thinking in their own lives.